Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a rugged Nevada farmer discovers 10 luxury homes built on his land without permission, a quiet inheritance turns into an all-out war. Forged documents, corrupt developers, and one man's relentless fight for justice ignite a wildfire no one saw coming. This is how land in Fremont took it all back. When my grandfather died, he left me 5,000 acres of dirt, sagebrush, and stubborn silence. I inherited it all: the flat, tilled pastures where he grew barley and alfalfa, the broken-down barn sagging like a tired old man, and a stretch of dry hills on the far edge of the property that no one had paid much attention to in decades. He used to call them God's forgotten knuckles. Not much grew there, and there weren't any real roads to speak of, but they were ours, and that was enough. I didn't rush to formalize the paperwork on the hills after the will cleared probate. Truth be told, I was up to my neck trying to keep the main farm from falling apart. The irrigation system was a relic from the Cold War. The fences had more holes than a colander, and my pickup only started when I bribed it with threats and fresh oil. So, I focused on what I could see from my porch and left the hills to keep being hills. That all changed on a Monday morning in late spring. The wind was kicking up from the west, and I was drinking weak coffee on the porch, listening to it slap the metal roofing like it had a grudge. My buddy Aaron, a crop-dusting pilot with a mouth like a slot machine and the attention span of a gnat, buzzed the fields in his little Cessna and then landed on the dirt strip out back. He strolled up, chewing sunflower seeds and grinning like he had a secret. "Landon," he said, spitting a shell into the wind. "You building condos up on them hills." I stared at him. "You hit your head on landing." "Nah, man. I flew over your northern ridge twice this week. Somebody's got steel frames going up out there. Looked like at least 10 houses to me. Big ones, too. Asphalt trucks, trailers, even porta-potties. Real operation." For a long moment, I didn't say a word. Just blinked into my coffee like the truth might be hiding in the grounds. Then I set the mug down and went inside. First thing I did was pull out the old laminated parcel maps my grandfather kept rolled up in a drawer, section 72 to 81, mine. Every lot, every ridge, every tumbleweed on those hills was marked with the Fremont name in black ink. That was enough to convince myself I wasn't losing it. But I needed to see it. By noon, I had rented a drone from a hobby shop in Reno, charged the batteries, and drove up the closest service road I could find toward the hills. I stopped just before the land turned steep and launched the drone from the bed of my truck. What I saw through the screen didn't just piss me off, it rattled something deep. There they were, 10 houses, all in various stages of completion, framed in steel, wrapped in Tyvek, with stacks of roofing tiles waiting nearby like little pyramids of smug intrusion, graveled roads carved into the hills like surgical incisions, big red and white signs posted at the edge of each lot. Future home of Juniper Hills Preserve, Phase 2, HOA homes available summer 2025. My name wasn't on those signs, but my land sure as hell was. I brought the drone back, packed it up in silence, and sat in the cab of my truck for a few minutes, watching dust swirl across my windshield. There was no easement filed, no sale, no call, no letter. Whoever built those homes did it either by mistake or because they thought I'd never notice. That was their first mistake. I started the truck, headed home, and opened a fresh notebook. This was war. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was panicking, I'm not the panicking type, but because my brain wouldn't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those houses again, squatting smugly on my hills like they belonged there, like I was the intruder. At sunrise, I brewed the strongest coffee I could manage and dragged out every box of my grandfather's paperwork from the cellar. He kept everything. Tax receipts dating back to the Reagan administration, old surveyor notes, even a yellowed envelope from a lawyer that still smelled faintly of cigar smoke. I spread it all out across the dining table and started digging. It took me 2 hours to find what I needed. The original survey plat from 1982, stamped and notarized, showing the exact boundaries of the property. It matched the hill ridges perfectly. Section 72 through 81, inclusive. Fremont Family Trust. No subdivisions, no easements, no transfer of ownership. I went online and pulled up the Washoe County Assessor's database. The land was still registered to me. I'd paid the property taxes just last month. Not a single inch of that hillside had changed hands. So how the hell did someone think they could build on it? I called up Owen Leister, an old friend of my grandfather's who worked as a freelance land surveyor. He was semi-retired, but when I explained what was happening, his tone sharpened. "Landon, that's not just encroachment. That's organized theft," he said. "You sure you want me to go out there? You might want to call the county first." "I'll call them, but I want documentation." "You're the best I know." He agreed to meet me on site the next morning, and I spent the rest of the day compiling everything into a binder: maps, drone footage, tax receipts, and copies of emails I'd already fired off to the county planning department. That night, I got a reply from a clerk named Dana Mendez. She was polite and professional, and completely baffled. "We don't have records of zoning applications for any new subdivision under Juniper Hills Phase 2. I'll escalate this to our enforcement division immediately." Well, that was interesting. The next morning, Owen met me just after dawn with his tripod and GPS gear. We hiked out onto the ridge in silence, aside from the wind and the hum of crickets in the brush. The houses loomed above us like castles in enemy territory. Owen set up his equipment, took multiple readings, and frowned at the monitor. "Yep, they're about 200 yards inside your line, all 10 of them." He looked at me. "This isn't a small mistake, Landon. This is surgical." They knew where the boundary was, and they ignored it. We documented everything. I filmed him taking readings. He signed off on a preliminary report that would hold up in court. He even suggested I install temporary stakes to visibly mark the boundary, just in case someone tried to deny it later. By noon, I was standing inside the Washoe County Planning Office, a manila folder under my arm like it was evidence from a crime scene. Dana met me in the lobby, just as puzzled in person as she sounded in her email. I laid everything out on the table: the drone footage, the old plat maps, the assessor's printout, Owen's field report. Her expression changed with each page. By the end, her voice was tight. "I don't see how this was approved. There's no record of zoning adjustments. Nothing was submitted by the HOA or the builder under this address block. And this signature here," she pointed to a permit request form I'd pulled off the county website. "This is supposed to be from a prior landowner." "Yeah, except I never sold anything, and my grandfather sure as hell didn't." She took a deep breath. "Okay, this might be bigger than a clerical issue. I'm going to notify our zoning compliance officer and the county attorney. If what you're saying is true, and it looks like it is, this could be serious." I thanked her and walked back to my truck, the binder still under my arm, my boots dusty with courthouse grit. Whoever Juniper Hills thought they were, they'd built 10 houses on land they didn't own, and they did it without even bothering to look at a damn map. That I intended to fix permanently. It took me 40 minutes to reach the hills by truck, and another 10 on foot, winding up the dirt path where the survey markers were still visible, flapping in the wind like little red flags of defiance. I'd memorized the perimeter line by now. Every contour of that ridge had burned itself into my mind like a brand. What I didn't expect was the scene that unfolded when I topped the ridge that morning. There were cars everywhere. SUVs, sedans, a golf cart, even a food truck parked on the edge of the dirt, offering organic samples from the Juniper lifestyle. Fold-out chairs, canopies, catered snacks. It looked like a damn real estate fair. And in the middle of it all, standing with her arms crossed and sunglasses the size of dinner plates, was Karen Mulder. I recognized her from the HOA website. Smug, mid-50s, perfectly shellacked hair, the kind of expression that could sour milk at 10 paces. She was giving a tour to a group of well-dressed couples, pointing up at the houses like she owned the sky. I walked straight toward her, heads turned. Her sales voice faltered mid-sentence when she saw me. A 6'2" farmer in worn jeans, sun-leathered face, and the kind of boots that had been through more manure than any of these people had in their lives. "You're trespassing," she snapped before I even opened my mouth. "No," I said calmly. "You are. This is private property. My property." A few people chuckled nervously, thinking it was some kind of act. Karen didn't flinch. "That's cute. I don't know who you think you are, but this is Juniper Hills Preserve Phase 2. Everything here was cleared through the HOA and the county." I held up my binder like a sheriff holding a warrant. "This land was never sold, never transferred, and I've got the survey, tax records, and legal plat to prove it. These homes are sitting on Fremont land, and I'm Fremont." Her smile vanished like a switch had flipped. She turned to one of her assistants, a younger man in a tucked-in polo and 2 clean shoes, and muttered something I didn't catch. Then she looked back at me and put on her best concerned citizen face. "I think you need to leave now. You're harassing potential homeowners. You're disrupting a lawful event." I took a step forward. "Lady, you built 10 houses on a man's land without asking. That's not just stupid, that's criminal." Her jaw twitched, and that's when she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the sheriff," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This man is aggressive, unstable, and threatening our development." I laughed. Not because it was funny, it wasn't, but because the balls on this woman were genuinely something to behold. "Great," I said. "Call him, ask for Sheriff Coates. Tell him Landon Fremont says hi." She paused, blinked. Sheriff Coates had been best friends with my father. He taught me how to shoot a rifle when I was 12 and still came by on weekends for coffee and peach pie. He was the last man Karen wanted showing up to this particular circus. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, I heard tires on gravel and saw his cruiser roll up through the brush. When he stepped out, he didn't go for his belt or bark questions. He walked straight up to me, shook my hand, and looked around like he'd just stumbled onto a very stupid party. "Karen," he said dryly, tipping his hat. "Care to explain what the hell you're doing on Fremont land?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Just a weird, strangled squeak. Sheriff Coates listened as I laid it out. The drone footage, the maps, the lack of permits. I handed him copies of everything. He studied the papers, nodded slowly, then turned to the stunned crowd of buyers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice calm but firm, "this is an active land dispute. By order of Washoe County, all development activity is suspended effective immediately. Please return to your vehicles and vacate the area." Karen exploded. "You can't just— This is harassment. This is a civil matter, not a police issue." Coates gave her a long, cold look. "You're right. It was a civil matter. Now it's a criminal investigation." And with that, he radioed for a county legal officer and a zoning enforcement rep. Karen's jaw clenched like a vice. I stood there as the crowd dispersed, watching the wind carry away brochures and plastic wine cups. The hills were quiet again, for the moment, but I knew better than to think she'd go down easy. Women like Karen don't lose quietly, they escalate. So would I. I didn't wait. The morning after Karen's little open house imploded, I was back in Reno, sitting across from a county attorney named Marissa Talbot. Sharp suit, no-nonsense tone, eyes that scanned documents like they were surgical targets. She didn't waste time on small talk. "Mr. Fremont," she said, flipping through the binder I brought, "you're telling me 10 full structures were built on your land without a single signed transfer, recorded deed, or zoning clearance?" I nodded. They never had permission. They didn't even ask. They just broke ground and started building like it was the Wild West. She tapped a page with a red manicured fingernail. "This signature, the one authorizing Phase 2 development. Do you recognize it?" "Never seen it before." "That's not mine. And my grandfather died 4 years ago. So unless someone found a psychic notary, his name shouldn't be on any documents." Talbot didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched. "I thought so. We'll need forensic handwriting analysis to confirm. But if this is forged, we're looking at criminal charges: fraud, forgery, misrepresentation, unlawful development on private property, and potentially conspiracy." "Conspiracy?" I repeated. She nodded. "If Karen Mulder and others knowingly submitted false documents to the county or colluded to bypass zoning procedures, it becomes organized criminal activity, which means it won't be just a civil suit. We'll prosecute." That was the first time I felt a flicker of real anger, hot and heavy in my chest. I hadn't just been ignored, I'd been targeted. Someone looked at my name on a dusty map, saw opportunity, and decided I was too quiet or too stupid to notice. They were wrong. I left her office with a thick envelope of affidavits to sign and a list of follow-ups. Then I called Owen the surveyor, who promised to rush the final version of his boundary report. After that, I contacted a private environmental consultant. If they'd touched even a square yard of the protected scrub zone my grandfather registered in the early 90s, they were in even deeper trouble. 2 days later, I got a call from Donna at the county zoning office. "You need to see this," she said. "Come down here." She met me in the back of the records building with a stack of permit files. Inside were zoning requests, signed clearance memos, and inspection forms, all for the 10 houses up on my land, and all bearing forged signatures. The supposed builder was a company called Sage Haven Developments, LLC. Sounded fancy until you looked closer. No tax ID, registered to a P.O. box in Sparks. The listed owner, Randall P. Greaves, Karen Mulder's former HOA treasurer, fired 2 years ago after a dispute over missing renovation funds. Dana gave me a look that said everything I needed to hear. This wasn't sloppy, she muttered. It was deliberate, hidden behind fake paperwork, shell corporations and contacts in low-level permitting. I've already flagged the files to the district attorney. By Friday, the storm was gathering. Sheriff Coates called to inform me that the DA had authorized a full investigation into potential real estate fraud. County auditors were reviewing every permit Juniper Hills HOA had filed in the last 5 years, and subpoenas were on the way. Karen hadn't just gambled with my land. She'd gambled with her freedom, but I wasn't waiting around for justice to trickle down. I hired an attorney of my own, Teresa Fox, known around Reno as the Velvet Guillotine. She was courteous, professional, and absolutely lethal. She read through everything I brought her, closed the folder, and looked me dead in the eye. They built 10 homes on your dirt. That's 10 counts of trespass, 10 counts of unlawful enrichment, and 10 counts of willful violation of zoning law. If they damaged any environmental zones, we add federal violations. This is going to be fun. I liked her already. The next Monday, we filed the civil suit. I was asking for immediate cessation of all development activity, full forfeiture of any property constructed on my land, compensation for land use, damages, and legal fees, and personal liability claims against Karen Mulder, Randall, Greaves, and Sage Haven LLC. Karen got served 2 days later. According to Teresa's paralegal, she screamed loud enough to rattle the blinds. Good. It took less than a week after the lawsuit for Karen to retaliate, not with lawyers, but with something pettier and dumber. I drove up to the ridge again one morning to find the construction crews back at it. Not all of them, just enough to make noise. Hammers, drills, power saws, whining like wasps in heat. 2 of the houses were being drywalled. A third had roofers on it. There were even landscapers setting up fake boulders and little juniper shrubs, like that would make the place legit. I parked my truck right in the middle of their dusty makeshift road and got out. The foreman looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I didn't recognize him. Mid-30s, hard hat, clipboard, tight lips. When I asked who authorized them to continue, he didn't even try to lie. HOA president said to finish exteriors. Said legal stuff's just a misunderstanding. I looked up at the roofers hammering away like nothing was wrong. She also tell you this is land under criminal investigation. He didn't respond, just called out to the roofers to wrap it up. I walked the property line again. My line, now clearly marked with Owen's stakes, which someone had carelessly knocked over and tossed in a pile near the porta-potties. They hadn't just ignored the court order, they were treating my land like it was their sandbox. I didn't call Karen. I showed up at her HOA office in person. Juniper Hills Preserve had one of those pristine faux rustic clubhouse buildings. Wooden beams, fake stone facade, a little fountain gurgling out front. It screamed fake wealth and desperation. I walked in wearing dusty boots and a flannel shirt still stained from fence repair. The receptionist blinked like she'd seen a ghost. "Is Ms. Mulder in?" The poor woman nodded toward the conference room. Karen was inside, mid-meeting, probably selling lies to a couple of retirees. I opened the door without knocking. "Get out," she snapped, standing up. "This is private property." I shut the door behind me. "So's the land your crew is building on. The difference is, mine comes with proof." She started to say something smug. I could see it building, but I cut her off. "You're in violation of a court order. Continuing construction means contempt. You're racking up charges faster than I can write them down." She laughed, loud and hollow. "You think I'm afraid of you? You're a farmer, a nobody. We're an HOA with resources, with legal teams. Those homes are already on the market. People are bidding. You think they'll care about your little surveyor and a few dusty maps?" I leaned in just enough to make her flinch. "Lady, you built 10 luxury homes on land that doesn't belong to you. You forged documents. You filed lies with the county. You dragged your neighbors into a criminal mess. And now you're standing in front of me, in a house of lies, thinking you're untouchable." I smiled. "You're not." She turned red. I could see her hands tremble just a bit, but she held it together. "You don't scare me," she spat. "Good," I said. "The district attorney will." That night, I sent an email to Teresa Fox with photos of the active construction, copies of time-stamped video, and a list of company names printed on the trucks. Within 24 hours, she filed a motion for contempt of court. And we weren't the only ones acting. Sheriff Coates showed up personally at the Ridge 2 days later with a zoning official and a county investigator. This time, they brought paperwork. Official cease and desist orders taped to each half-finished house. One of the construction foremen was nearly arrested for refusing to leave. By the end of the day, the hills were silent again, only the wind and the creak of empty frames. Karen hadn't learned her lesson, but she'd just given us everything we needed to bury her. By the time the contempt filing went through, Karen had gone silent. No more tours, no more landscapers, no more arrogant speeches on HOA letterhead. The construction site sat frozen in place, like corpses at a crime scene, unfinished, exposed, and now cordoned off with yellow tape and laminated notices from the Washoe County District Court. But that didn't mean it was over. If anything, the silence was just the pressure building behind the dam. 3 days after the site was shut down, I got a call from Teresa. Her voice was steady but tight. The forensic report came back. On the forged documents? Yes. The signatures don't just fail comparison. They were done using a traced template. Whoever did this copied your grandfather's signature off a scanned warranty deed from 1993. Even the pressure patterns match a transparency overlay. I didn't say anything at first. Just let that settle. They hadn't just signed in his name. They'd resurrected a dead man's hand. Who did it? I finally asked. She hesitated. It's traced to Randall Greaves, the former HOA treasurer, the man who incorporated Sage Haven Developments, the same man who filed all 10 fraudulent applications using a county login that's since been deactivated. So we've got him, I said. We've got both of them, she replied. Emails between Karen and Randall surfaced. Someone in the HOA's own IT firm leaked a backup archive. Karen personally coordinated the building sequence, used her position to push false zoning clearances, and promised Randall 30% of sale profits if the homes closed without challenge. That was it, the smoking gun. Or, in this case, the smoking Outlook inbox. Teresa filed an emergency addendum to our civil suit and forwarded everything to the DA's office. Within 48 hours, subpoenas turned into arrest warrants. I was out fixing a broken irrigation valve in the alfalfa field when Sheriff Coates pulled up again. He stepped out, dusty boots crunching against the gravel, and handed me a copy of the arrest affidavit with a faint grin. She's going to love this one. What are they charging her with? I asked. Start with real estate fraud. Add filing false instruments, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity falsification, and unlawful land development. All felonies. And that's just what the DA's announced so far. I wiped my hands on a rag and took the affidavit. And Randall. He was arrested this morning in Carson City. They found boxes of documents in his garage, blank permits, signature guides, even rubber county seals. It's like the guy was running a criminal DMV. Later that day, news broke across northern Nevada media. HOA president and former treasurer arrested in multi-million-dollar land fraud scheme. Karen's mugshot was plastered over every station, her perfect hair replaced with county orange, her smirk traded for something hollow and confused. I watched the broadcast from my kitchen, arms crossed. For a second, I thought I might feel something. Satisfaction, maybe. Relief. But mostly, I just felt tired. This land had been my family's since before World War II, and I'd had to fight tooth and nail just to prove I owned what was already mine. The following week, the first court hearing was held. Karen was marched into the courtroom in shackles, lips pressed into a straight line, eyes blazing with a hatred that probably could have powered a mid-sized county on its own. Randall sat next to her, looking like a deflated lawn ornament. They pled not guilty, of course, but the judge wasn't buying it. The court finds sufficient cause for full trial proceedings on all charges, the judge declared. Bail is denied for both defendants due to risk of document tampering and flight. Karen flinched like she'd been slapped. Her attorney leaned in, whispered something, but her expression didn't change. She was starting to understand something. This wasn't going away. Trial started 6 weeks later in a packed courthouse that smelled like stale coffee and old HVAC filters. The case had grown beyond our sleepy county. Now it was a statewide headline. Local stations were parked outside with vans and satellite dishes. Reporters scribbled in yellow legal pads beside retirees holding thermoses. Inside, it was standing room only. Karen sat at the defense table, wearing a dull gray blazer and the same rigid posture she probably used at HOA meetings. Randall was beside her, already sagging under the weight of the proceedings. Their lawyer, some guy from Vegas in a too shiny tie, was throwing every procedural objection he could, but none of it stuck. The evidence wasn't just solid, it was overwhelming. Teresa Fox made sure of that. She opened with clarity and fire, presenting aerial drone footage, Owen's certified boundary surveys, notarized tax statements, and digital metadata from Randall's own computer. She walked the jury through forged permits, false plat filings, and bank records showing wire transfers between Sage Haven Developments and Karen's personal account. She didn't need theatrics. The truth was damning enough. Karen's defense, weak as it was, leaned hard on ignorance. She believed the land was abandoned, her attorney claimed. She trusted the documents presented to her. It didn't work. Not when the prosecution showed emails where she bragged about fast-tracking construction before the farmer notices, or when they read aloud her exact words to Randall. It's not like the guy even checks that part of the hill. We've got a blank check of dirt up there. I watched the jury react to that one. A sharp inhale from the older woman in the second row, a headshake from the retired rancher in the front. Halfway through the trial, we presented expert environmental testimony. That sealed the deal. Turns out 3 of the 10 houses were built on a protected mule deer migration corridor. Karen had not only trespassed, forged, and lied. She'd bulldozed straight through a federally recognized wildlife habitat. Federal charges were now on the table. By the time the final arguments were delivered, the room was thick with tension. Teresa stood calmly and said, "This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a hostile land grab, deliberate, orchestrated, and executed with arrogance. My client is not seeking revenge. He's seeking justice and the right to own what is already his." The jury took 5 hours to deliberate. When they returned, the foreman, a soft-spoken math teacher from Sparks, read the verdicts aloud like nails into wood. Guilty on all counts. Karen blinked hard but didn't cry. Randall just stared at the table like it might open up and swallow him whole. The judge didn't waste time. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks out, and until then, both were remanded to custody. Karen protested loudly, insisting she wasn't a flight risk, that she had duties to her community. The judge's reply was simple: "You have no community left." The civil judgment came next. The court ordered full forfeiture of the 10 structures built on my land. They now belong to me, legally, uncontestably. The judge cited constructive ownership, unlawful enrichment, and injunctive relief. "Mr. Fremont," she said from the bench, "you are now the sole and rightful owner of these properties. Any sale, transfer, or development henceforth is under your discretion alone." I stood there a moment, not entirely sure what I was feeling. Vindication? Maybe. But it also felt like something heavier. Like I was dragging my family name back uphill with a chain of concrete tied around my shoulders. Still, I walked out of that courtroom with my head high and my boots loud on the marble. My land was mine again. All of it. No forged signature, no smug HOA dictator, no backroom zoning trick could change that now. 2 weeks later, I was back in court. Same hard benches, same buzz of whispered gossip, same overhead lights that made everyone look guilty. This time, it wasn't about proving anything. That part was done. This time, it was about consequences. Karen stood before the judge in a pale beige suit like she was going to a church picnic. Randall wore county orange, resigned to his fate. Neither looked at me when I entered. Fine. I didn't need eye contact. I had truth on my side and a court record to back it up. The judge didn't waste breath. "Karen Mulder," she began, "you abused your position of trust, forged documents, manipulated county systems, and orchestrated a deliberate campaign to steal property that was not yours. You involved others. You deceived your community. And worst of all, you showed no remorse throughout these proceedings." Karen didn't flinch, but I saw it. The smallest twitch at the corner of her mouth. "For criminal conspiracy, real estate fraud, and document forgery," the judge continued, "you are hereby sentenced to 6 years in state prison." Karen opened her mouth, maybe to object, maybe to scream. She didn't get the chance. "Your accomplice, Randall Greaves," the judge said without pause, "has been found guilty of aggravated fraud, identity falsification, and intent to deceive a government body. You are sentenced to 10 years without the possibility of early release." Randall slumped. Karen's composure cracked. Her hands trembled. She was escorted out by 2 deputies, trying to keep her chin up as if dignity would somehow change the destination. It wouldn't. The HOA board, what was left of it, resigned en masse 2 days later. Juniper Hills Preserve was declared non-operational, placed under administrative supervision by the county. Turns out, when your president goes to prison and your treasurer is exposed as a forger, even suburban tyrants lose confidence. As for the 10 houses, well, they were mine now, legally, fully, and permanently. Teresa helped me sort through the logistics. Taxes, transfer filings, environmental restoration reports. I had the option to sell, to sue the county for indirect complicity, to tear it all down. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, I did something my grandfather would have approved of. I cleaned them up. Not flashy, just structurally sound. Roofs finished, wiring fixed, no landscaping nonsense. I partnered with a local nonprofit that helped young ag students and environmental science grads find affordable rural housing. Each tenant had to sign a conservation agreement, pledged to support the land, not exploit it. They weren't just renters, they were caretakers. By summer, 6 of the houses were occupied. One couple raised goats. Another ran a seedling greenhouse. One guy was building a windmill out of scrap metal and spite. The hills were alive again, but on my terms. I put up a new sign by the gravel turnoff, hand-carved cedar, burned letters. It read, "Private land. Entry by permission only, EST 1946, still standing." And underneath, in smaller print, "If you think you own it, bring paperwork. Otherwise, turn around." Sometimes I still drive up there after sundown just to see the lights in the windows. Not a development, not a subdivision, but life. Real life. Quiet. Earned. I didn't ask for this fight, but I finished it. And now, for the first time in years, this land feels mine again.